Hello, my name is Marlon Evans. I serve as the CEO of NextCubed. I'd like to welcome our HBCU founders and to those listening in via HBCU Nation to this PropTech webinar, which actually is the fourth and last in a series of webinars that have highlighted innovation opportunities across fintech, education, and health and wellness. We'll be posting all of these webinars on our YouTube page. So if you happen to miss any of the first three, you can catch them there. And I'll just say that you're in for a real treat tonight. We've assembled an amazing panel of industry leaders and entrepreneurs at the forefront of PropTech. And the first half of the webinar will be discussion on the trends in PropTech, with our kind of second half highlighting the personal journeys of some really talented PropTech entrepreneurs. I will now turn the floor over to our Chief Strategy Officer and the former founder of Rocket Space, Duncan Logan, who will serve as the moderator for the industry panel. The floor is yours, Duncan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if I can invite up our panelists this evening to come and join me. I don't know how that happens, but hopefully they can come and join me on screen. Hi guys. So let's talk a little bit about real estate. Real estate is the largest industry in the USA by revenue. It accounts for 13% of GDP. Investors often talk, when they're talking to startups, about total addressable market, TAM. Well, it doesn't get bigger than real estate. But real estate is not an area most people first think about when they think about startups and innovation. But things are changing at real estate. Between 2012 and 2018, investment in PropTech grew by 1,700%. That's 1,700% growth over 6 years. And then obviously this year came COVID. COVID has been an enormous catalyst for change within real estate. It really has forced about 10 years worth of innovation on an industry in 1 year. And where there is change, there is opportunity. We see this all over. People are moving to warmer, lower tax, more affordable, and a better quality of life, as companies also have to now adapt to think about flexible working as a new regime. Every aspect of real estate needs to rethink itself post-COVID. From retail to hospitality, commercial to industrial, real estate is changing. So we have an all-star panel today of 3 experts from across the industry. Claire, Lafonza, and Tony. First, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role in real estate. Claire, could I start with you?
Sure. Well, hey, everybody. It's nice to see some faces. And first of all, thanks for having me. My name's Claire Cormier-Tilke. I'm with Hines. So we're a very large real estate developer, acquisitions and fund specialist, the largest private real estate firm in the world. I head up our Asia expansion business throughout South China and through other parts of Asia, and have previously served in roles there on the development side, building big offices to the special situations and strat side. And then I also serve on the board of Zillow. So, and love all things real estate. Definitely excited to be here and take the journey and spend some time with my fellow panelists here.
Great. Lafonza, we're so lucky to have you on such an important day for Airbnb. Quite an incredible event that's gone on today. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Duncan, and to the fellow panelists. I'm looking forward to this really incredible conversation. I want to thank all of the participants. As a HBCU graduate, I can't imagine how valuable these kinds of conversations are to you as you're thinking about your career in entrepreneurship or other pursuits. And so I appreciate NextCube for putting these kinds of spaces together to continue to learn. My name is Lafonza Butler. As Duncan noted, I am a director for public policy at Airbnb. I am responsible for all of our North America policy and partnerships work in such a highly regulated industry as short-term rentals and real estate. More generally, my work really focuses on making sure that we create the right partnerships with government at every level to make sure that we are operating and serving not only our stakeholders, but the communities in which we operate. And so I am really looking forward to tonight's conversation and whatever questions may come up from the group.
Great. Thank you, LaFonza. And finally, Tony.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I appreciate it. Yes, my name is Tony Knuckles, and I'm currently the Vice President of Mortgage Banking at Quicken Loans. I've been at the organization roughly 24 seasons is what I call it. I've been fortunate to spend time in a lot of different areas, from marketing to training, leadership development, and most recently trying to grow our remote banking channel. So unique opportunity. It's what disruption has caused us to innovate, which is great. And I too look forward to learning from our panelists as well as all of the people that have joined us here tonight. And I think it's going to be a great discussion.
Great. Thank you. Well, let's get right into it. So, LaFonza, you're the newest person to arrive in their current role. So, you obviously had a very successful political advisory career before this, working with Kamala Harris. What made you? What was the tipping point that made you want to join Airbnb now?
It's an interesting question. I think, I've sort of had a number of different careers, Duncan, as I'm sure you're aware. But, for me, what I've learned over sort of my working life is solutions to big problems are no longer are found in silos. That really, to solve some of our biggest challenges that our society faces, we really do have to search for those intersections. And I felt like Airbnb was a place where the intersection of economic empowerment, real estate, and technology really sort of came together. And I felt like it was a company that I could find relationship from a values perspective, and I'm excited to really sort of learn something new. If there was one note that I wanted to offer to the participants who are listening, it is that there's always an opportunity to change and to evolve. And as young leaders and entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to take the personal risk. Some might have said that my past career had nothing to do with where I am now, and because I was willing to find the intersection for myself in a company that shared my values, I was able to be a part of a really special day today in a company that has, I think, contributed to economic empowerment across the world. So
it's an incredible story. And Claire, for you, it's always been real estate since leaving university. I think you were at Stanford. You went straight into real estate, and was this always your passion, or did you know at university you wanted to go into real estate, or was it something you fell into and then?
No, I did. I was a big real estate nerd and fell in love with this business when I was, 9 or 10 years old. I was fortunate enough to grow up in Houston, Texas, which interestingly was one of the early and most robust MLS groups to go online. And so I grew up being able to, surf the early internet and look at houses. And I was a runner, and so I'd go out running or on my bicycle and go look at the houses. So there was this very tangible connection between, pricing, improvement, value add, and then things that I could see. And so I just loved it. I didn't know what the path was necessarily to a career. And at the time, I certainly didn't understand that there was this whole wide world of institutional real estate beyond it. But the concept of placemaking was so clear. And interestingly for me, growing up where I did, I didn't know I would ultimately end up there. But having Hines have been in my hometown and having seen them create such really centers of the community, I had all of these fascinating examples to follow. So it's, don't worry, kids. Sometimes you do actually end up in the business that you study. It is possible.
Great. And talking about long time commitment, Tony, you've been at Quicken, well, you have to explain to me the Rocket Mortgage Quicken Loans relationship, just because I know that the two are together, but for the listeners, it could be interesting just how that came together. But you've been there for 25 years. This is a phenomenal stretch, a great innings, as they'd say. How have you seen, once you've described the relationship between the two, how have you seen Rocket Mortgage change over the years, or Quicken Loans?
Okay, well, first let me explain the relationship. So, we were founded by a pretty exciting visionary entrepreneur, just like the folks that are on this panel, as well as in the groups here. And he had this gigantic vision, and it attracted me to the organization because it almost seemed too good to be true. And some of the best entrepreneurs really have that type of compelling fire and desire within. So he started a company in 1985 right out of college called Rock Financial. And he and his brother and his best friend. And they had this dream, and the dream was, we can disrupt an industry, because his mother was in real estate, very similar to what Claire talked about, looking at homes. His mother would be taking people around in their cars and looking at different homes, and he'd be in the back seat. And then he would see this mortgage person come around, and they were kind of a little bit what we would call not the sharpest, tool in the shed. And he thought there would be some opportunities when it came to client service and when it came to delivering. And it really got him excited. And so he grew Rock Financial from 1985 to the late 90s until we were acquired by a Mountain View, California company called Intuit. And we did a divestiture, and then we were repurchased by a group of investors and rebranded ourselves to Quicken Loans because it had a national platform and brand name. And then from there, what happened was we grew the company tremendously over a number of years. And then we started to innovate more, and we created a Rocket Mortgage brand. We were the first in Pioneers Online. Then we decided, well, online's cool, but not everybody's just sitting in front of a computer, unlike today we are. They're going to their phones. So we needed to be where the eyeballs and where the people were. So we decided to really innovate and create an online platform for people to acquire their home loan. Unless they had money to pay for their home for cash, they had to get a mortgage. So that's where the Quicken Loans name came, and then we rebranded Rocket Mortgage as a product inside of our Rocket companies. And I'll tell you, it's just been an incredible journey because we continue to innovate and create. And I, by no stretch of the imagination, thought I would be here this long. However, the organization has always made me feel like an entrepreneur. And so I've been able to recreate myself inside of the organization, having different opportunities, growth opportunities, as well as building relationships and doing great things like we're doing here today, Duncan.
Right, great. And one of the things I love about any company, and having started a few myself, is the culture that naturally forms. Can you talk, Tony, about the culture at Quicken Loans?
Yeah, I absolutely can. It's one of the things I'm most passionate about. And fortunately for me, I got to interview with Dan, 24 seasons ago. And so I knew inside of his vision that there were, core principles that drove his decisions. And so what we did is we operationalized those principles, but it wasn't just top down. It came from everyone inside of the organization. So we have key principles that drive our decisions. I'll just give you one example. It's not about who is right, it's what is right. So whenever we have to make a big decision inside the company, in hierarchical businesses, you'll see whoever has the biggest title or the biggest budget or whatnot, they make the call. And, we were never going to buy into that bureaucratic line of thinking here. So what's made it refreshing for me is that it's always about the best solution always wins. And so that's just one example of the many different things. And, every client, every time, no exceptions, no excuses. We have no tolerance for not going above and beyond for our clients, and we do it consistently and repeatedly. But those are, values that are attractive to people that are looking to join companies. They're attractive to people that are part of companies, because it's not just people talking the talk, they're literally walking the walk. And so that's what's inspiring to me, is that although we've been talking about it for 24 years for me, 35 years for the organization, we continue to live out the values that you might sometimes see in a lobby, in an office space, or maybe in a boardroom. You don't need to put it on there here. You can see it when you interact with the people that bring it to life every single day.
Great. And LaFonso, you mentioned that Airbnb sort of shared your values, but arriving into Airbnb, what surprised you about the culture there? Is there anything that's been eye-opening in joining that organization?
It's a very interesting question. I think, similar to what Tony described, when I joined, as a part of the interview process at Airbnb, the values just are really sort of baked in. There's a whole separate panel of people inside the company that interview based on a values fit. And I found that to be insightful. I found it to be a clear demonstration of not only the rhetoric of having a set of values or something that fits on a bumper sticker or letterhead, but an opportunity for the company to really demonstrate and to select the people based on that sort of set of values and making sure that people fit within the company's sort of culture and operations. And so I found that surprising a bit, that to have a conversation as a part of the interview process with people not related to the discipline or department that I would be joining, but my values interviews were with 2 engineers and a person from customer service. I think to Tony's point, really to really demonstrate that it's not just about the people with whom you work every day. How do you show up and demonstrate those values consistently across the company, appreciating the dignity and talent and gifts that everyone brings to make the company successful? And so it really has been a place where values are talked, yes, but are also walked. One of the values that really sticks out to me at Airbnb is being a serial entrepreneur. And that has a lot to do with the story of how Brian and Joe and Nate created the first set of resources, selling boxes of cereal at the 2008 DNC, Democratic National Convention, to actually keep the idea of Airbnb alive and going. And that's really what they try to create across the company, a sense of every opportunity that we have is an opportunity to innovate, is an opportunity to push through the challenges and advance an idea that keeps the company on the cutting edge. And similarly, right, there's no bad ideas except the ones that don't get tested, that don't get voiced. And so, yeah, it was a surprising part of the interview, but I have been pleasantly surprised at how consistently from the every level of the organization and the company that those values really sit in and set in and are demonstrated consistently.
Yeah, I think those cereal, wasn't it McCain-O's or Obama-O's or something?
Obama-O's. It was Obama-O's.
That's right. Dating it, but I can remember reading about that. Great. And Claire, so Heinz and Zillow, very different companies. You sit on the board of Zillow, which is, to me, one of the first, I guess obviously there was many before, but that Zillow, Trulia, Redfin kind of renaissance, they were the first kind of things when I think of innovation in the real estate market as the titans that came through. But can you talk a little bit about the culture at Heinz and the culture at Zillow and how they differ maybe, or how they are similar?
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of similarities that may surprise folks, both definitely coming from super dynamic founders who found a way to inculcate their vision. Rich and Lloyd are just incredible entrepreneurs, and the rigor of their thought process, the creativity that they bring, the voice that they use, and the openness, they really push that throughout the organization, but also they really put it out to the world to help people really understand what they're trying to do. And very different times. In 1957, there was no Twitter, there was no internet as we currently know it. But Jerry Heinz was very much that same way. I mean, these things that Heinz does today seem so natural and obvious, but were just unbelievable innovations at the time. So, Mr. Heinz, we just lost him this year at 95. He was still coming into the office and making things exciting. I was hired by Mr. Heinz personally. I mean, he was so engaged, but he was a mechanical engineer, and he saw an opportunity to come into the real estate market and build with a level of sophistication, an attention to detail, and really around a theory. And so much great entrepreneurship starts around a theory that becomes a tested idea that becomes a conviction strongly held. And his was that whether markets went up or down, you couldn't control those cycles, but you could control quality. And if you built quality, using top architects and using good, mechanical, buildings would live longer, and good design, tenants would like it, that whether markets were up or down, people would be drawn to your buildings. And that was a pretty out there idea, especially in a wildcatting, swamp like Houston, Texas. And so the idea of bringing, starchitecture to a place like this that was absolutely flyover country at the time, or putting a skating rink in the middle of an Italian-inspired, galleria in the middle of a 100-degree city. That stuff was really out there and really brave. And so I look at today's entrepreneurs and these, really big and exciting bets, and I see so many parallels and analogs to a young Jerry Hines with his slide rule, convincing Shell Oil that he could build them the tallest unreinforced concrete structure in the world, skyscraper, when he'd never built a skyscraper before. But he believed in himself. He hired really smart people, brought them around him, and got out of their way where he needed to. And he bet big, and it was exciting. But it all came down to his ideas, his study, his openness to really sharing his ideas, and then also just absorbing like a sponge that of others. And I think there's just something we can all learn from that every day.
Yeah, it often, I mean, it actually kind of rolls well into another question for you, Claire, is when it comes to the entrepreneur. I think every sort of generation or every cycle of tech has its entrepreneurial flop, if you like. We can think of Webvan or Pets.com or so forth. And obviously, I think WeWork, it still exists, but it's just been such an incredible story in front of just a huge vision, a huge opportunity. And then, it just kind of imploded. How did Hines look at WeWork when it came onto the scene? Were they like, wow, we should be getting these guys into our buildings? Or were they, no way, we've seen this story before, we don't want to touch co-working? Or what was the attitude within Hines around it?
Yeah, well, we're always looking for where is the market going, and that comes from just the boots on the ground, sort of seeing where trends are headed. And so we had been watching sort of the early WeWork moves, and we're some of the first really to work with them and to put them into buildings, and we had a lot of respect for what they were creating. And I think the thing that really drove our conversation, or I'd say for, definitely for me personally, setting WeWork, the company or how its story will unfold aside, the underlying concept around, co-working, which, back in those early days, there was a very common question of, people saying, how is this different from Regus? Yeah. And, I think people who are, the vintage of those folks on the call would say, well, there is a difference. Regus has a certain model and is aiming for a certain type of customer, and there was something different here. Let's explore that. And I think wherever this story of WeWork as a company will end, we will look back on this time and really WeWork's key growth years as transformative in how real estate was really defined. Yeah. We say that real estate moves under the metric of cost per square foot. And that is really not a logical language for 99% of the working world, right? It's something we sort of force on every industry. And the reality is that companies, whether you're a small startup making, water bottles, or a private equity firm, you're really thinking about, I want to do my business and I need some space to do it. And I don't know how big we're going to be in 3 years. I hope we're going to be real big. But, that this concept of taking swing space, that's complicated. I've never done that before. Or I don't know how to hook up my internet. These are a lot of things when I want to think about making my water bottles. And, but if you asked me, how much space do I need if my revenue next year is X, Y, or Z, and I knew what I was paying for chair, maybe I could understand that. And so I think there was this sort of a great rebalancing in terms of the rest of the business world thinking in price per head and what can I pay in sort of revenue per head, and applying that to real estate that was really kind of pushing us real estate folks and landlords to move in that direction. And again, not just Hines, but really every kind of major landlord. So I think that shift in conversation is something that will last and really define this generation of real estate going forward.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think WeWork has It kind of reminds me of the Napster for digital music. They've proven there's an enormous demand for something different, and maybe their model wasn't quite right coming out. But yeah, I think they've opened up the floodgates for a ton of opportunity. Tony, moving across to you, if you were a young entrepreneur today focused on the mortgage industry, where do you think that the opportunities are in the space? You know, maybe giving away what's your roadmap?
Yeah, well, I would tell you if I was a young entrepreneur that wanted to really disrupt, I think it's still in the end-to-end process and how you go about obtaining a loan. There's still too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, and it's a very fragmented process. We're doing our very best to innovate, create, digitize, and streamline it. However, I think there's pockets of opportunity. One would be just in the near term, talent. There's a fierce landscape out there for people that have experience in the industry. And, there's a war for talent and, companies are going all out to get that talent. So I think there's one, but from a product side, I would say any system from an appraisal to title work to surveys to any old antiquated system that meant someone had to go in, get in a car, visit a location, and upload paperwork, fax it potentially, maybe even put it in the snail mail, and get to a person who would either be deemed an underwriter or a processor or an approver with a stamp. Those are areas that are just ripe for disruption. And then I would say, one of the biggest things that I've noticed is just, the end experience for the consumer. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, people view this industry as transactional. People aren't getting a mortgage every other year, although that might be different over the last few years. But historically, you're only getting 5 to 7 in your lifetime, right? So how do you keep the relationship there with the customer? How do you keep the client at the center of the experience for many, many years and be loyal? We have a very good reputation and we get a lot of repeat business, but no one is, really the dominant player in that space for client loyalty and retention. So there's big opportunities for that, for those who are willing to put in the time, energy, and efforts to try to create in those pockets of opportunity.
Great. And you guys kind of straddle both fintech and PropTech. I mean, you're now I think I'm right in saying the largest provider of mortgages in America. You're bigger than
Yes.
any bank per se. It's incredible. I'm sure you get pitched all the time by startups wanting to work with you or partner with you, or what advice would you give to startups trying to get in touch with your
Well,
organization?
that's a great question, Duncan. I would say that, yes, we do get quite a bit of, people knocking on the door and looking to pitch the organization. Unfortunately, sometimes they're starting with the wrong end in mind, what's in it for them versus what's in it for the person that they're presenting to. But I would say that, the opportunity lies in just listening and observing and finding out where the problems lie. Like LaFonza said earlier, there is always a solution to a problem. And it's just finding out where those are and then be willing to go back and figure it out. Now, I would say, Duncan, that the advice I would give is don't come with a minimal viable product. Okay, that's nice, but many of us could come up with that very, very quickly on the back of a napkin. I know it sounds good; it might sell in movies, but we need a viable product, not minimally, but something that we can get at scale very, very quickly if added on to what the organization already does on the platform. So there's probably some other maybe early entry startup type of organizations that you'd want to pitch there, but this is a well-run machine that is looking to grow market share, by 3x here in the next 5 to 7 years. So, the juice has to be worth the squeeze for them to really entertain the idea of coming in and saying, how could this be a win-win for your company as well as our company?
Great. Thank you. Do you have any entrepreneurship programs within the organization? Do you encourage that?
Yeah, we have quite a few actually. We actually have we're based in Detroit, and we have a group called Detroit Venture Partners, which is a startup group, and then we have people that have proven companies that are a little bit beyond the minimal viable product. And we have Rockbridge Growth Equity, where we make investments into those organizations to help give them not only the potential mentoring and sponsoring from a standpoint of how to move the business forward, but also the financial discipline and rigor to try to make the right decisions early on, so you don't make the wrong mistakes as you're trying to grow and get to scale. So between Detroit Venture Partners, Rockbridge Growth Equity, those are two ways that you can go from startup to already proven concept, and then potentially integrate into the family of companies. We actually are, it's the Rocket Companies. It's about 100+ different companies that we tie threads and share ideas and concepts with each other to try to mentor and coach and develop innovation within our large organization.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Lafonza, can you describe what you do in your role? Just, public policy to a lot of people on the call, it could cover a lot of areas. Could you just give us an insight to what's your day to day?
I mean, to the participants, I think they're right to imagine it as broadly probably as they're thinking about it, because the Airbnb does. And when you think about a company whose mission is to ensure that anyone can belong anywhere, that encompasses a lot of places of public policy, anywhere from immigration and anti-discrimination to, of course, the sort of bread and butter of short-term and long-term rental regulations in local markets, to big issues that may be sort of happening at the federal and state level. And so, what my job really is to work with a team of public policy professionals all across North America to make sure that from a policy perspective, our partnerships with government are ones that advance that broad mission, supporting our hosts, supporting our guests, our employees, and helping to ensure that the communities in which we work are safe and thriving.
Right. And what advice would you have for anyone wanting to get into this sort of line of work, either into politics or into working at Airbnb or that sort of business?
Yeah, no, it's also a great question. I don't know that it's one that is revolutionary, but I think it was Claire who said it is true that you can work and form a career in what you study. I studied at an HBCU government. I studied political science, and to be able to have lived a full career with many chapters across the different levels of engaging with government and finding solutions to big challenges in the communities that I grew up in has really been a gift for me, and to all of the participants who are listening. Though that making a decision about where to focus while you're in college is definitely not one that can't change and shift. But I think it is a decision that helps to create the framework for the career that you create for yourself. And so for someone who is interested in politics, get involved in your communities, in the areas that are where you find your own sort of personal passion. And for folks who are interested in becoming an entrepreneur, I would think that the advice would be very similar. Claire told the story about Mr. Hines, who had a theory about an area in which he was passionate, and he decided that he was going to get involved and do something to advance his theory. And so the advice isn't different from my perspective, Duncan, in terms of how I have thought about my own career and the contribution that I wanted my life to make. And so I would offer the same to the participants here. Once you find that passion, pursue it vigorously. And there are many paths to get to the destination.
Yeah, great. And Claire, 2020, well, it's been an incredible year, both politically and obviously due to COVID. I still think back to that first kind of news report where they were talking about locking down the economy, and I just thought they can't do this, and now it seems like life is as normal. But Hines is an enormous company. You've got 165 developments in production at the moment. I think I read off the website. Firstly, what was the company's reaction, to COVID? Because all of a sudden, I'm sure buildings were shut, sort of thing. And then of those developments, was there anything that you changed? Was there anything that they said, actually, we got to think about this in a different way, or pause, or whatever?
Yeah. Well, nothing makes you feel like a global company like a global pandemic, for sure. So I'd say it's an interesting question, Duncan, in that we feel very fortunate in that a lot of ways we sort of had the cheat codes because, in Hong Kong, so where, home for me, we had been dealing with, Wuhan flu at the time since January 4th. And so my typical day, I could be, preparing to go to Shenzhen or take the train in the morning. And that was really the first time that, there'd been rumblings, but where someone said like, hey, actually, Claire, maybe you shouldn't do that thing of walk all the lobbies, ride all the transit. Maybe you should sort of lay low. And so there were things brewing, but SARS had been limited to Asia. There had been other, pandemic-like things that have been limited to one part of the world. And so we had a bit of a preview and a head start. And number one. And number two, we still have our Heinz China team has been there 25 years. So a lot of those building engineers and property folks were there for SARS. And they were very early to say something's coming. Let's sort of re-engage the tools that we have and the knowledge that we have. And so we kind of called a working team together, and that was, again, still January, to say, what's our protocol for the buildings. In our China buildings, we have several large headquarters, including some very large Chinese security firms that needed to be online right after Chinese New Year. And again, sort of like Thanksgiving and Christmas, where people gather and come back, you sort of like knew that there was a big wave of something coming. And so we were able to sort of triage, get ahead of it where we were. And then, there were a few of us who had insights. I happened to have come to the US for a meeting right around that time. And, it was late January. It was clear that this was very serious and poorly understood, just at a bigger scale. And upon landing in the United States, it was so clear that the US wasn't ready for what was coming. And, but it is a global firm. You're able to have that conversation with your colleagues and say, how can we make sure that we're, not just a little bit ahead, but a month, maybe even 2 months ahead of how to prepare for this. And so it's been a great sort of what comes next on what happens on construction sites. How do you get people comfortable coming back into the office? What do a second, third, and fourth wave look like? What does that feel like? And so, when we watch this sort of time machine roll across the world, in each case, when it came to sort of the building best practices, we were able to put those in place, for the developments, just from the very practical standpoint of, a lot of seeing what countries or jurisdictions did to shut down construction and really understanding what it would take to come back online. So, to your question about how do we think about the buildings that we're working on right now or that will come in a post-COVID world, I'd say, we take a pretty complex view here, which is first, how do you build for the world that we enter? But also recognizing that, the world has been through, and again, coming back to Asia went through SARS and then found its way back. And you know what, 2 years ago, people were working in offices just as they were in the fall of 2002, 2003. And so there are things that are human nature that do come back, the urge to gather. But there are these phases of what do workers need to feel comfortable re-entering the workforce, and then what are the things long-term that they'll want. And so, certainly things like outdoor amenity space or the ability to be flexible for, indoor, outdoor, et cetera. Frankly, this really just accelerated a lot of trends that were happening in office anyway, that we were, pretty convicted on and building towards. But it's, you definitely want to think about our post-COVID world in chapters. And that's really how we've approached it as an organization.
Right. So I live here in the bubble of San Francisco. And, I think speaking to friends who are living in, expensive living in tower block, expensive high rises, because that's where a lot of the new properties are being built in San Francisco. Those areas where you have to go in an elevator to get to your home or the gym, all the amenities have been shut. Do you think everyone comes back to that? Because at the moment, the rental prices in San Francisco have collapsed for those sort of properties because everyone wants to get get out of town?
Yeah, it's when you're in a moment, it's always so hard to picture the other side. But they do, and in parts of the world say they have. It's sort of wild to believe, but China's back and really has been for many months, and has found a new sort of path forward. Parts of Asia, same story. Hong Kong's got some waves it's dealing with. And certainly have people become more thoughtful or aware in a sort of work-life blur environment of what they value. Absolutely. And in the US, where there'll be people who will take the option to move to Salt Lake or Miami or Colorado, so they can hike or swim and live a bit differently, for sure. But real estate's also made out of cycles. And as San Francisco gets cheaper, there will be a whole wave of people who are maybe in a different point in their life who will find that attractive or see this as the opportunity to get into the market. And the building stuff, the proximity, in a lot of places people don't have the kind of choices. They have to live densely, and so you'll find people who will appreciate that.
Yeah, great. LaFonza, your role in Airbnb as a business, obviously now as a public company, has I'd say it's kind of changed the world in many ways of how people think about their properties and how people can generate income from their own properties and these kind of additional income sources. How do you think in your role you can make a positive impact on society in driving what you're doing at Airbnb?
Another sort of really big, you're sort of giving me all of the big solve the world's problems questions. Great, another sort of great question, Duncan. Look, here's the, I think, little known thing that people can appreciate about our hosts. As I said before, the mission of Airbnb is just one where I feel like everyone can see themselves, and this notion of belonging and connection, again, to the point of anyone can belong anywhere. And so, the mission itself is one that I feel like an impact on society is our responsibility as a company that has the audacity to put forth such a bold vision statement. And so what can we do? Our hosts on average earn an additional almost $8,000 a year to supplement their income. That is meaningful money to a working mom who is trying to cover her childcare commitment, and very meaningful to a single father who is trying to make sure that he's able to send his or her his kids to college. And so I think the mission of Airbnb and the way that it enables and empowers everyday people to use their greatest asset to help to create a brighter future for themselves and their families is making an incredible impact on society. As a company, we recently our .org, Airbnb.org, also just launched earlier in the week, where again, meeting a responsibility in times of crisis through our philanthropic work to house refugees, to house emergency workers and first responders. Our CEO recently made an announcement about continuing our ongoing support of frontline workers as they are, doing the work to really save so many lives in our hospitals and communities around the country. And I get to sort of, build the regulatory scaffolding and the partnerships to enable and empower those opportunities for folks. And so, where we all try to measure our lives in being able to make a difference for one person, I get the opportunity to as is often referred to in tech, do it at scale. Yeah. And to all of our participants and listeners, no matter the vision that you have or the major that you choose, really take the opportunity to think about how can you make one life better and use your experience to do it at scale.
Great. And and Tony, very, very quickly, because I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, but very quickly, if you could give one piece of advice to an entrepreneur and maybe a book that you would recommend, what would it be? And on both accounts of that.
Okay. Well, I would say the first piece of advice I would give an entrepreneur or a budding entrepreneur would be, like LaFonza said, you really have to find your passion. And let me explain how. A lot of people say, find your passion, find your passion. So the how is when you're more excited about doing something tomorrow than what you're doing today, that may be your passion. So what I'm trying to say to you is you can do your passion like Claire explained and have it for a career. So the key would be making sure, number one, you find your passion. Two, when you do, surround yourself around bright, talented, smart people, because you will get stronger. We have a saying, the strength of the wolf is the pack and the strength of the pack is the wolf. So who you surround yourself is truly who you will become. And so my thought is, if you surround yourself with great people and you have a passion, you're halfway there. And then it's just about never giving up, never giving in, no quit, and always just pushing forward, realizing that you can get better every single day. Now, from a tech standpoint, there's a few that jump out at me. There's the old classic Jim Collins' Good to Great, which is a great book on business and what companies do that are good, that make that leap to great. However, I like to take it down to the granular level when I'm speaking to individuals. So one book is QBQ by John Miller. He's an author out of Denver. He talks about the question behind the question. And so there's always questions behind questions. So for people that read this book, and I don't want to give it away, it's just about taking personal responsibility and realizing that you can truly create your own destiny. And then I would say 20 Things That Matter by Hal Urban. It's a book about not just what you can do to be successful in business, but life, making that greater impact. I will tell you, Duncan, if you would have said to folks, 20, 25 years ago, hey, there's this little black boy from Saginaw, Michigan, same hometown as Stevie Wonder, Draymond Green, Serena Williams' birthplace. Can he go out there and make his way in the world of fintech real estate? They might have said you've lost your mind. But I will tell you, it's important for us to have role models, people that keep pushing the envelope and realizing that, we can truly, truly, truly make a difference if we choose, I believe, learning initially over earning.
Great. Well, you guys are certainly all role models, and I can't thank you enough for taking time, out of your day to give back, as it were, to help the students on this call hopefully get into entrepreneurship and maybe even into tech and property. So Claire, Tony, LaFonza, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'll hand it back to Martin, I think.
Thank you. And now we're going to bring up our entrepreneur roundtable. So we will be bringing up Justin Lee, who will be moderating, and then the other roundtable panelists will follow. Welcome, Justin.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Definitely a pleasure to be here. Super excited to hear more about the entrepreneurs. It was definitely influential to hear from the industry. Little background about myself, I'm a Morehouse graduate, and I received my master's degree from LSU, originally from Louisiana. I actively invest in real estate. I'm a licensed realtor, general contractor, and I have Airbnbs, rentals, and things of that nature. But I too was an entrepreneur in college and always had a lot of questions about entrepreneurship in college and just how to form a startup and just the overall aspects of business and entrepreneurship. And as you know, most colleges don't have programs that are very, very strong in it. So super excited to moderate the entrepreneur panel. Want to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves. So I'll start off with Christelle.
Hi, sorry, it's a lot of sun right now.
Yeah, it looks
I'll
beautiful.
just move a little bit. Hi, thanks a lot for having me. It's I'm very grateful to be part of this group of entrepreneurs. So quick introduction on myself. I'm French, you've already noticed my accent. And I founded Cody 2.5 years ago. And it's the first company to create private workspaces in people's homes so that remote workers can go walk to work and find a quiet space outside of their own home.
Super cool. Super cool. Great. So I'm not sure. I, okay, there we go. I was looking for you, Imran. I'm like, okay, where is he? That's a super cool background as well. How about you? Can you give a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Justin, and thanks for the opportunity to share. Hey, everyone. My name's Imran Koja. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Just Appraised. We build software that uses AI to drive different to streamline different processes for local government tax assessors. So these are the folks that assess property values. Before doing this, I worked as a business and interaction designer at IDEO and was a product owner at Spotify, which is a music streaming company. I'm sure most of y'all have know that. Where I started was entrepreneurship, though. I co-founded a couple small businesses out of college, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And in terms of my educational background, I went to Williams College for undergrad and then Stanford for business school. And I didn't move too far. I still live in Palo Alto, so stone's throw from campus. And that's it for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. How about you, Fatima?
Hi, everyone. My background's not as cool as theirs. My name is Fatima Diko. I'm the founder and CEO of Sugar. Essentially, what we do is we create mobile technology for residents of large apartment buildings to be able to throw events with each other, buy and borrow from one another, as well as do really cool things such as unlock their doors from inside the mobile app. Prior to working on Sugar, I worked at Procter & Gamble on the front-end innovation team, creating products 3 to 10 years away from market. I have a chemical engineering degree from Columbia. And like Imran, I also went to Stanford Business School. And yeah, looking forward to the chat today.
Definitely. Well, last but certainly not least, Margot.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. And thanks for, I love to hear all the other stories too. It's always inspiring as an entrepreneur to hear others' stories. So I'm joining you from my children's closet in San Francisco, literally, but no, all good. I've had a really crazy background. And to be honest with you, when I was in college, I did not think I was going to be an entrepreneur. I was looking at jobs in public policy and research. And I sort of stumbled into it because I graduated from college in 2001. And then I graduated from business school in 2007. And so basically these were like the 2 hardest kind of years of recession. And I think it's made me a lot stronger. So for all of you that are out there that are like, oh shit, the world's falling apart and now I have to go get a job, you are going to have so much more grit and determination than other people who graduated when things were really hot. So just like keep that with you. So anyway, just a few like notes on my experience working. I actually ended up working for an architecture firm and I ran the business there, applied to business school, went to business school at University of Michigan. And then I worked at Apple and I helped to launch the iPhone developer program there. This was like when Apple was still a really small company. It had just launched retail stores. So it was a very different place and learned a lot, but also hated it there. It's a very secretive environment and I'm a person that always wants to know why. So I joined an early stage startup and really found my true love and had another job working for a recurring revenue solutions company called ServiceSource. I ran marketing and strategy there for the $250 million business unit. And then I took some time off and I was super tired actually and burnt out. And I wanted to start my own company. And so today I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hostfully. We are a company that's in the travel space. And so we help Airbnb hosts with managing a bunch of different listings at a time. Justin, I'm curious if you've had this experience. So managing an Airbnb is really, is fine when you do it for one, but when you do it for multiple, it gets really complicated. So you have to manage lots of guests, emails, payments, getting listings from different bookings platforms. You have to have a centralized calendar. So our software helps you do all of that. And we have a kind of interesting story where we actually started as an experience discovery kind of platform with making local guidebooks. And now we pivoted to making software for property managers. And so I like to think about my experiences like very like kind of twisty and turny. I'm a person who just loves learning about new things. And I really did not have a clear line of sight to entrepreneurship, but I am definitely an entrepreneur. And it's okay to like sort of stumble around on your way there. So I just want to share that with the audience as well.
Definitely. I'm definitely excited to talk to you a little bit more about that as well. I'm out of town right now in New Orleans in my hotel room and my Airbnb. I'm like, oh, Airbnb Verbo, all these different messages. I'm like, I'm literally trying to respond to messages right now without responding. And yeah, so
We got to talk. That is literally what we do.
literally. So excited. So I'm going to get off to it. A lot of exciting questions, things that I personally have asked myself and have been asked probably 1,000 times a month, just about entrepreneurship and just the journey. So I'm going to put them out there kind of in an open forum that you guys are open to answer however you feel, if you feel best for you. The first question I wanted to ask was, what are some of the challenges and surprises that you faced being a prop tech entrepreneur? Not all at once.
I can go first if you want. I think a lot of prop tech companies deal with like double-sided marketplaces. I mean, at least I run into a lot of marketplaces in prop tech. And that's a big challenge because it's the egg and chicken problem. You have hosts on one side and then members on the other side. Without supply, you can't get members, and without members, you can't get supply. So it's really the egg and chicken problem. So how do you kind of go from 0 to 1, and start to scale after the first phase is very tricky of building that marketplace. And I think that was kind of the first challenge that I ran into when I started the company.
Definitely. I can definitely understand that part of it. Did anyone else want to add to that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in. A little bit of context. Our company is a result of a pivot. So prior to doing what we're doing in PropTech, we were a platform for college campuses where you can buy and borrow from people who are nearby fairly quickly. So we saw things getting interacted like energy drinks, red Soho cups, people borrowing air mattresses, all sorts of things. And our average delivery time was 7 minutes. And we scaled to 20 campuses around the country. Obviously, during COVID, with campuses shutting down, we pivoted to large apartment buildings and leveraged a piece of the technology for people who may want to do a similar thing in apartment buildings. And one of the first challenges that we ran into is that yes, it was really exciting to come into this space where we saw that there hadn't been a lot of innovation happening in terms of like the consumer mobile experience. But at the same time, we had to be really mindful of property managers and their pre-existing software stack, and making sure that we're not introducing a new product that requires them to have an entirely new software on their back end. And so just really studying the industry and getting into the minds and the computers of the people who would be making the decisions and kind of designing your software around that. So that was, I think, a challenge early on, coming from like a consumer focused app over to B2B.
Margo?
Yeah, I would say that another challenge with PropTech, and it goes back to the same core idea that Fatima just mentioned, is that there's a lot of variability in inventory and the way that like different companies are working in the space. So even in my business, like I'll have two customers that both have 5 properties, but one has like 5 luxury homes around Lake Tahoe, and the other one is like located in New York City with all 5 units in one apartment building. And those customers have totally different needs. One has inventory that they can swap around, right? That they can like change out. If like one rental comes in and they're booked up, they could be like, oh, I have this other room that looks just like that. The other one is like, no, we've got like one that has a pool and one that doesn't have a pool. Like the intense amount of variability in inventory has actually been what has made property tech kind of like slow and archaic. But the cool thing is that all of these things can be solved with software. It just takes more work. And I actually enjoy that part of prop tech. I think that makes this industry like harder for people to enter and harder for people to do a good job. So if we're doing a good job, really listening to our customer needs and also really focusing on what kind of customer we want to serve, we can actually win. Whereas like if it was a more consistent inventory, like I think you just have more companies coming in and succeeding faster, and it'd just be like more of a quick race. Now it's more of like a long marathon, but like if you win big. So I really appreciate that challenge.
Definitely. I think really from here, the next appropriate question after that question would be, how has COVID impacted everyone's industry? I know that pretty much from here, as entrepreneurs, we all have different fields of it and how we deal. So Fatima, you may have more of a customer-facing business, where Margot has something that's more of a virtual thing, but also impacted by COVID because the travel restrictions, things of that nature. So really, if everyone could address that one, would be great. Just how COVID has impacted your industry, your business, and just in general what you've seen. So I guess we can start off, Christelle.
I think Imran was about to jump in. Go ahead if you want. Okay. Yeah, so Cody before COVID was really, kind of co-working in homes. So really, there's a huge in-person component is the basis of the business.
Right.
So we were impacted like drastically negatively because of COVID, obviously lockdown and stuff like that. So the consumer model, we shut it down for several months, and we're starting to reopen slowly. But it forced us to also like just pivot the business towards a more B2B approach, because at the same time, this crisis has made a leap in the future of 5-10 years for remote work. There's never been like the whole world is working remotely. It's crazy. And there's so many companies now that are like, why am I paying $1 million for an office? People prefer to be remote, right? Like 80% of employees said they prefer to be remote than going back to an office 5 days a week. And so it created a huge opportunity for us to actually grow in that direction and like directly partner with companies to help the remote workers access the space outside of home, because at the same time you're struggling because you may have kids or roommates or you live in a studio. It's not easy for everybody to be at home every day. And so for our business, so bad like on the consumer side, but like really good actually to boost the growth on the B2B side. And we've never grown as much as we are right now. So I think like in crisis, there's always opportunities to explore, and you refocus on like, okay, where can I deliver value the most today and tomorrow?
Definitely. I see that, it's definitely caused people to have to think more outside of the box and just thinking of what you just said. You hit it right on the nose. Where can I add value the most, So definitely. Fatima, would you like to add to it?
For us, and I think Imran, I want to.
I'm sorry, Imran. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah. No worries. I mean, I'm interested in what all of you have to say, so I'm happy listening. From our standpoint, everything that we had done prior to COVID was like had a huge in-person component. So we're selling more enterprise software. Pretty much every customer we had closed until that point, we had met in person at a conference or actually visiting their office, demoing our software. These are folks that are not used to buying technology. They're not used to changing technology. We would do all of our training in person. So we would actually have someone on site sitting with the person using our software and making sure that they felt comfortable. So imagine like COVID hits, all of our launches get canceled. And so that definitely was a pretty scary moment. Fortunately, I think this tailwind of technology tailwind of working remotely has really helped us, because these offices were not in a position to work remotely, and our system facilitates that. And so we've had to kind of change our model where like now all of our training is done over Zoom. We've closed a ton of deals, obviously without meeting people in person. So we have experienced that tailwind, but it has come with other challenges. I think in our industry, folks are generally more skeptical of signing bigger contracts without that relationship being built in person. And so, I think we've done really well, like done better than expected for sure, and have unlocked maybe a bunch of customers that we wouldn't have been able to get previously, because of the fact that folks are basically being forced to adopt technology to do their jobs. But on the flip side, some of these bigger deals, in the like hundreds of thousands of dollars, those deals are much harder to close because you don't have the ability to get in front of that person and go through kind of the motions that someone would expect to go through if they're spending a pretty significant chunk of change.
Yeah, makes sense. So definitely from your side of it, I know that that one is more of a not a tougher sell, but more of a variation of people to go through approaches. When you're buying technology and software, it's not just as easy as a consumer approach. You're looking at more of an enterprise approach. So that takes, climb the ladder, presentations, things of that nature. So um, great perspective to offer though, because I'm sure on the call there are people that are looking at multiple different routes of consumers, whether it be person to person or business to business or a mixture of both. So thank you for that perspective. Uh, Fatima, finally.
Awesome. To go back to our journey, we had a very interesting story because we had been, essentially operating in a space on college campuses that was, our entire business. And so this was the result of a pivot. And so we were very intentional about when and how COVID would impact the utility of our product. So before just kind of taking the product and launching it in apartment buildings, we tried to think about this terrible situation as an opportunity to leverage some of the features for things that would now be true during COVID. And I highly recommend that, to bring this to advice for people listening on the call. To Margot's point, a lot of great companies, were built during recessions and during difficult times because people are identifying unique opportunities that are a result of the challenges being faced. So some of the things that are being leveraged with our app that we didn't consider before, people are using the app to unlock doors for self-guided tours of apartment buildings and things like that. We never would have considered these features in the app early on. But we really wanted to think about not only what things are true during COVID, right? Because we don't want to be reactionary, but what things are true now that will most likely be true moving forward as well. So fundamental shifts in society. So as people are thinking about, things that they're passionate about, I would err against just thinking of like COVID related, solutions, but more so how is society going to be different 5 years from now as a result of this, and what things are going to be true then that you should start creating for today.
Yeah. Always, think for the future and think of how to better innovate. And I think if anything, this is something that no one prepared for. We all had to like literally come out of nowhere with thoughts of what now. We already thought we were in the future. We were technology and advancing technologically, but I'm just like, wow, the spin of it is crazy. Margot, I'm curious to see how's it impacted you?
Yeah, it's just so basically what our customers, it was horrible. They had like no bookings, travel went down to a standstill. Our investors were like, your revenue is going to go to nothing overnight. Like you need to redo everything. I mean, so that did happen for like a month, but then what ended up happening was that our customers had all this time on their hands and they were like, oh, I need to become more adaptable. So I need to be using software differently. I need to be responding to my customers differently. So they started actually wanting to know about our product a lot more than before. And so we had have had kind of like, I mean, we're going to end up this year kind of like in the middle of like the best case and the very worst case. Like we're just doing well. I would say the thing that has really been the biggest learning for me this year has to do with like culture and team though. And just like, I feel like if we were an athlete before this, we were like decent, and now we have a freaking 6-pack, like we know how to like do this. Our team is like lean and mean and efficient, and we are communicating well. And we've done things internally at our company that really emphasize like time together, how well we're communicating or not. And also things like that will set us up really well for growth. So I think this is why actually people and companies that last through recessions do better, is because we are forced to be careful about our time and be careful about our money. And I think, speaking to an audience of younger people, like you also are careful about the sense of meaning that you have that's associated with your job, especially this year, because I'm sure everyone's had a moment where it's like, what am I doing with my life, right? Like we're faced with a virus that is literally killing people. And so we're all asking ourselves, like, is this how I want to be spending my time? Is this what I want to be working on? And you have to find that sense of meaning. And so whether it's like with your teammates or with the solution that you're building and your customers that you're delivering on, or the impact or innovation that you're having on the market, like people are asking themselves existential questions. And I think for us and our team, like we've like really anchored on what it is. Like we want to help people. And so one of the things we've done this year that's unexpected is like we're a differentiated solution with regards to customer support. We have amazing customer support and onboarding. And it's because we just wanted to like get really close to our customers. And now that's how we're being recognized in the market. So that's, you know, I mean, our product is great and it's really powerful. And that's probably why people are initially attracted to it. But it's really been in the service and support and the relationships that we have on our team that our team has really shown. Yeah.
Definitely. I definitely think that's one key part to any business model is going to be the relationships, of course, the customer service, and just overall the atmosphere that you create for your consumers. So good point there. I see that
There's a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Did you see those?
Yeah, I was just about to address it. I think there were a couple there. So for best use of time, those first few questions that I asked, I wanted to definitely get a full perspective from everyone. But for the next few, we're going to just go ahead on and kind of take 1 or 2 per question. The first question that I see from the pool was, how do you advise innovative students to build teams to develop their IoT ideas, especially if the student is not as tech savvy or in a program that is geared towards the PropTech field? So,
I would say for students, one thing that I wish that I got a better grasp on early on was just the lean startup model, and how do you quickly test an idea to see if it has a right to exist without, you know, spending as little time, money, and energy as possible, and really convincing yourself what market validation looks like, right? Market validation is not your friend saying it's a good idea. It's not your family members saying this is great. It's honestly, it's not a few hundred people signing up even, you know, on a landing page or on a mailing list. Not to be like super negative, I'm just trying to save a lot of time here. You know, market validation is like very concrete evidence that people will pay money or spend their time consistently and frequently using your product. And so whatever you need to do to convince yourself, you don't need to be tech savvy necessarily during the early stages to gain that market validation. Eventually, if that's not a skill set you have, you will need to build a strong team around that to compensate for that, especially as a tech company. You will need a strong co-founder if you go that direction. But even prior to that, you need to convince yourself that this is something that has a right to exist. And be honest, brutally honest with yourself. One thing I would do is when I would get into Ubers, I would like talk about ideas as if they were not mine. Like, oh, there's this app doing this now. And just to get feedback, because people won't tell you the truth all the time if it's an idea coming from you. So that's, I'll leave that there.
I love that idea. Like almost go in like trashing your own idea just to see if they're going to defend it to you. That's awesome. Oh, just so Lean Startup is the book by Eric Ries. Definitely check it out. I just want to make sure that that is a real thing, and like most good entrepreneurs would swear by it, I would say, in early stages. So somebody asked about books in here. I just wanted to like call that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would just sorry, I just have one thing. One thing too is I think especially when you're thinking about a technical idea, kind of echoing Fatima and Margot. Like it's easy to get tripped up on like what you don't have, right? It's like, oh, I need to build this product. Like I can't move this forward unless I have this. But I think, you know, focusing in on trying to sell something before you've got it, like that's how you're going to get that validation. And ultimately that's what matters, because you can spend a whole lot of time trying to build a whole bunch of things that ultimately will never kind of earn a dollar, and so it's just important to kind of it you know, it feels scary, right? You're putting yourself out there, you're asking for something when, you know, maybe there's not a whole lot of infrastructure built out around it, but it's really good practice to try and find that validation.
Definitely. So I see here a couple people have asked pretty much about the importance of business school and the pros and cons of it, being an entrepreneur. I too have an MBA, so I can add just a little bit to that. For me, it taught me more of the structure of how to organize business plans, financials, segment your target demographic that you're targeting, and just more of the presentation aspect of it. How about some perspective from you all? How important was business school for you?
I didn't go to business school, so maybe I can talk about that. I come from an engineering background, like hardcore sciences, like math and physics, and I was like, yep, I don't want to be an engineer. And on this side, I was always doing kind of innovation contests. I would highly, highly recommend students, even if they're not in a business school or in the business track, to go and participate to those challenges, students, innovation contests and competitions. It's out there. There's like one that is very inspiring called the Halt Prize, by Bill Gates. It's open for anyone. You can sign up, and they have like a great theme every year, and you can participate and build a project around it. So there's many things like that you can do without like being on a business track. And that's what made me realize I love cities. I love urban planning. And that's how I got to urban planning at UC Berkeley. So I have a master's in city planning, so still not business school. But that's how I got the idea and the passion around, like, I want to solve these urban challenges. And I met a couple of entrepreneurs during my time at Berkeley who told me, look, like, this is the best time for you to test the idea for real. Like, I was thinking initially I can do a thesis around it or something. But no, they were like, you have nothing to lose, just get out there and do it. So I was literally staying in people's homes and welcoming other people to come co-work with me. And that's what you guys were talking about earlier, about like getting out there. And then if you have the luck to be in a university that allows you to take other classes outside of your main track, business classes or entrepreneurship classes will always be helpful. And so I was part of like the big ideas contest across the UC system. That's open for any students at the UC system. And that's how Cody was actually born. We won the competition, we got a grant, and then from that grant, I just like bootstrapped the company. And at the same time, I went for an accelerator program at UC Berkeley and took a lot of classes at the business school. So I could almost say I have an MBA, but I don't. But my second year at Berkeley was actually a lot of business classes instead of my urban planning classes. So if you have the choice, like, go and go to those classes, even if it's not your major or your minor. But yeah, that's the best way to get the knowledge and then test it on the ground.
Definitely.
I have a little add-on to the go into business competitions. It's like a little hack. So if you participate in these competitions, first of all, you can do them with people outside of your school. So like I actually did one at Apple with an engineer from Michigan, and we ended up going to like the final rounds of like 3 companies that presented, and then they launched the feature 6 months later. So they already were working on it, but it was like really cool that we were sort of ahead of the game. But it was really cool to work with an engineer, and I really appreciated having another person's perspective, and it taught me a lot about who I like to work with. And I think that that's one of the things that you learn with those competitions. Like, you have nothing to lose, whatever, even if you just like go flame down in flames, like, it doesn't matter. You're always going to learn something from it. You're going to learn like who you like to work with, what kind of ideas you want to work on, what you don't want to work on, who you don't want to work with. And I think that those are all very valuable test things for that when you get out there in the real world, because finding a co-founder is so important. I mean, finding the right co-founder is so important. And why not have an experience or have 10 experiences leading up to that will help inform you about who you want to be working with. So my hack, though, is when you go to those competitions, you're going to be on these, like, you're going to have like judging panels. They're going to invite in like venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and other professors and like alumni, and they're going to judge your idea, and you could totally network with those people. And so like, it's a really easy way of getting a fast track. Like, if you do a good job, I mean, obviously if you suck, you know what, even if you suck, you can still network with them. But it's a great way of like sort of building your personal network, building an investor network, even before you're there. Because like, if somebody reached out to me today and they were like, hey, Margot, you were on this, like, I judged a bunch of Berkeley business school competitions. And if somebody reached out to me and they were like, you saw my idea 3 years ago, I'm starting this new idea. Will you meet with me? Can I ask you for an intro to your investors? I totally would meet with them. And I think that it's just like another way to just get out there and meet people that are enthusiastic about entrepreneurship. And I've only seen this happen like a few times. So it's like a little secret hack that I would highly recommend.
That's definitely a good perspective because I personally haven't had a chance to attend those, but I'm sure in this field, having just those tips and tricks are extremely useful. So thank you for that, Margot. Let's see.
Did any of you guys go through an accelerator? Because there is a question about that, and we went through 2. So I have many thoughts, but I'm curious what other people think.
Yeah, I did as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Imran.
Yeah, so we did Y Combinator, which was it was pretty interesting. I think the thing with accelerators is, or my take on the whole accelerator thing is, it's a great time for you to stay focused. It's super helpful in terms of giving you this brand. But I think my experience of Y Combinator is that you get this brand and it helps you kind of raise money, but it's not going to help you figure out your, whether you're just because you get into one of these accelerators doesn't mean that you're going to be successful as a business. And so there's like, you have to do all the same amount of work to figure out your business and make it good. And maybe they help you by creating a bunch of pressure. So you have to do that in a shorter period of time. But I think that the big benefit was like having some peers that you could get feedback from, and then the ability to raise money. I think one potential downside, which I felt pretty strongly, is we got into this program right after graduating. We didn't really have a ton of traction. We were pretty early. And it's very easy to do this thing where you start comparing yourself against other people and where other people are at, and that can be very, very, very. It can be very, very difficult mentally, like on your mental health. And doing a startup is hard enough, and then kind of beating yourself up because you're not as far along as, say, someone that's been working on their business for 3 years. Like that doesn't really help you. And I think just one other thing to note is that when you are in one of these things, there is some element of competition, right? So everyone is posturing, everyone's it's in their best interest to be, crushing it, for lack of a better term. And so you have to kind of know what you're in it for, and you have to be okay with where you're at, and obviously be working hard, but just try and stay focused on the bigger picture, because building a startup is a marathon. It's not a 100-meter race. And yeah, you don't want to burn yourself out because that's a really hard place to come back from. So that's what I have to share there. And I'm excited to hear what other people have to say.
A quick add on that. So we went through StartX, and then we also went through, during the early stages, GSB Labs, which is how I met Marlon, and then we stayed connected, and now I'm on this panel. So I bring that up to say that view every opportunity. There's like a saying that goes around where if you ask for help, you'll get money, but if you ask for money, you'll get help. And I think in a lot of instances, if something doesn't necessarily result in getting funding, that doesn't mean that it won't be equally as beneficial or compelling for your business later down the line. The one thing I would highly recommend against for accelerators is don't optimize your business or your team for the sake of an accelerator. Because I see this happening a lot where people are scrambling, like during the Y Combinator, like interviews, or like trying to, like, that ends up being like the end goal or like the milestone. It's like, if we could just get to Y Combinator, if we could just get into Techstars, then we know that we have a right to exist. And all these accelerators say time and time again, they're wrong a lot of the time. And most of the people I know who went through Y Combinator applied multiple times. And so I just want to also bring up the fact that if a rejection from an accelerator is enough for you to stop working on the business, you probably didn't have enough passion to sustain you for the amount of time that you're going to be working on it. And so just really, mentally prepare. It's a marathon, right? And so an accelerator can be a tool that if you leverage the right way can be really beneficial, but it should not at all psychologically be an indicator of, how you're going to perform as a company. Although the brand, like the Y Combinator brand, is very strong, right? To Imran's point. So, leverage tools the right way, but again, it has to be from a place of passion and from a place of persistence and resilience, independent of the outcome.
Thank you for that, Fatima. I think really everyone today has really given such a great perspective. And I tremendously have learned a lot from the call. There's one thing that I'm personally curious to know, and I think that everyone on the call would like to know. As founders, really quick, in 30 seconds or less for the best sake of time, what are some of your goals for 2021 for the business? What we're foreseeing if there is an impact of COVID or anything like that. What are you foreseeing for 2021? So 30 seconds or less real quick. Whoever wants to go first can go.
I can go really quick. My goals for this year are to figure out how to scale culture. Our team was 8 people at the start of the year. It's like 30 people now, and who knows how big it's going to be next year. I would never have thought we would be 30 people. So scaling culture, I think communicating better it's always hard when your team gets bigger. You have to communicate everything. It's crazy. This idea of like learning how to see around corners, I think with everyone, there's this element of feeling like you're not the best you're not the best person for the job, but you're in the job. So you've got to kind of figure it out. And so figuring that out for myself too, I think those are my 3 big goals. And then I have a revenue goal as well.
Definitely.
I'll go really quickly. 2 big goals. The first is someone gave me really good advice that the key to executing is keeping goals simple, clear, and measurable, and making sure that everyone on the team can say the goals and know they can measure where progress is. So again, simple, clear, and measurable goals. And then secondarily, not letting external events, impact my focus. So remaining really focused and just moving forward, again, keeping goals simple, clear, and measurable.
Definitely.
All right, can we go next? I think main goal for 2021 for us is really to further the mission as much as possible and scale the company throughout the nationwide. We have a unique opportunity to demonstrate that people can work remote. It's been demonstrated already. It's about making it sustainable for the employees and for the companies. And so we really want to kind of further that mission and keep educating companies and employees about how can you, walk to work and have a sustainable way to live and work in your neighborhood.
So for we are totally focused on growth this year. So, talk about measurable goals. I actually don't really want to share our specific numbers with this group because they are confidential, but we're focused on big growth numbers this year and also some aggressive improvements with churn. We are a SaaS business. And so, getting churn down can be really, really important to our ability to scale. We also are at about 30 people, Imran. So I actually think that we've done a decent job of scaling our culture, but now we're in execution mode. So now it's we have the team and we're ready, and now you got to start running. And I'm excited to watch us run this year. And I think one thing that I want us to do better is actually use data on a more regular basis to inform our smaller decisions. We've used them to inform larger decisions, but now we need to get to the point where we're looking at advertising on a week over week basis and figuring out exactly what the ROI is. And we're using that as a trade-off against other kinds of marketing campaigns. So it's a very executional focused year for us, but very exciting.
Okay, definitely. Well, I have one last question. This is a super tough one here. Let's talk about the financials now, JK. The last question really is, how would you like the viewers to contact you? Like, what's the best way to connect with you after this? Is it LinkedIn, Instagram, or what have you? If you could enter that into the chat box would be great. Definitely enjoy meeting each and every one of you. I've already probably stalked your socials and LinkedIn's and sent you messages there. Really, really excited to have heard the news and look forward to connecting with you all. I'm going to hand it back to Jade from NextQ.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This was absolutely phenomenal. And I really, really enjoyed hearing all of you guys give your great expertise and learning more about your individual journeys. And so that really concludes today's program. I do want to make sure to notify everyone that tomorrow is the big day. So this concludes our industry webinars, but in many ways, it's still very close to the beginning. So tomorrow, via nextcube.com/HBCU, our Summer Accelerator Program application launches. So students, this is your perfect opportunity, and recent alums as well, to really be able to apply to work on your company full-time in the summer of 2021 in Silicon Valley and receive $10,000 in funding. So this is a really great opportunity. And so we look forward to receiving your applications starting tomorrow when they open. And then for all of the NextCubed HBCU founders, program participants, we are also having office hours tomorrow. So make sure to stop by and ask your questions and get a chance to work with Act House as well as the NextCube team to be able to work on your businesses and ask your questions. And special thanks to our partners at HBCU Nation. If you guys are out there watching us on HBCU Nation, thank you so much for tuning in. And so this concludes our program, and we look forward to seeing you at the next virtual event. Thank you so much.